Mastering music has become exponentially more difficult over the years because everyone's adding their 2 cents into the mix and telling you exactly how you should do it and what you should do to your tracks and how you should do it and how it should sound. And to be honest, there is no real rule. The only rule that I go by when I'm making my music is if it sounds shit, it is shit. If it sounds good, it is good. So hopping straight into the track, I want to basically break down the process of mastering. I'm going to break down 3 specific ways that you can master music, 3 different plugins and 3 different methods you can use. But before we hop into any of that, I just need to make sure one thing is clear. When you're mastering your music, your mix down should sound good. If your mix isn't good, your mastering won't fix it. You should look at mastering like icing on a cake. It doesn't make the cake, but it definitely makes the cake look a little bit prettier. Let's hop into it. If your final mixdown should be sitting around about -9 to -6 dBs, it should be kind of at a comfortable level around those areas. The reason why we're sitting at those areas is because when you're mastering a track, you're adding a limiter onto it and you're going to boost the levels. If your track's peaking at -2 dBs and you're adding a limiter, that limiter is really not going to do anything. So let's give this track a listen and we'll see where we're sitting and we'll work from there. Yeah, so my track's sitting between -9 and -6, not really peaking above -6, not really going below -9. So we've got a 3 dB range of compression that we can add. And yeah, the first plugin I want to speak about is the ARTG mastering. This is a Wave Studio plugin, and it's one of my favorite plugins to use. Reason being is because you have so many parameters to work with and it sounds amazing. On the left-hand side, you have a basic input. So wouldn't really touch the phase and I wouldn't really touch the balance at all. The things I would touch is the input and the tape. So if you wanted your track to be a little bit louder in the mastering chain, you could boost it up here. And the tape equalizer, what this is, a lot of people don't actually know this, but in the good old days, US tape machines and UK tape machines sounded completely different. One would give you more lows and one would give you more highs. So I'm just going to go left and right on this plugin just so you can kind of hear which one gives you lows and which one gives you highs and how it sounds. So if you were looking for like a crispier sound, you would pull it more to the right. If you're looking for a more flat, low-endy sound, you would pull it more to the left. And that's how you would use that. The next section is an EQ, and it looks very intimidating, but it really isn't. I'm going to click the button on the top right, and I'm going to hop into the back section of the EQ. Because I'm EQing stereo, whatever I change on the left will change on the right. So what we're going to do in this area over here is we're going to solo one of the sections, and we're going to listen through the frequency bands. So the top one I normally use for highs, so I'll put it on 11 or 16. And then I would go through the curves that we have here. And I would try and see if there's anything that I hate or anything that I love. If I hate it, I'll pull it down by 2 dBs. If I like it, I'll boost it by 2 dBs. So I'm going to give you a nice example. I'm going to go to the mid section over here, and I'll just do it on this section. And that's basically how you would kind of go about that. It's basically just an EQ, trying to get your track to sound a little bit nicer, trying to clean up some areas. If you think your track's a bit boxy in an area, you can use that EQ to just pull it out. The next thing that it has is a compressor, and I really love this compressor. So we're gonna have it in stereo. When I'm trying to compress my master chain, I'm never compressing it more than 5 dBs. Reason being is because it just crunches up too much, and if I add a limiter at the end, then that limiter is really compressing on a compressor, and then everything just sounds way too squished. So my recovery time is chilling between 2 and 3 normally. I'm leaving this on modern because I'm making electronic music, so I'm gonna leave it on modern. The main thing I'm changing here is the ratio and the makeup. So I'm gonna check over here. I'm just gonna look for -5 dBs of compression, comfortable -5 dBs, and then we will go from there. Cool. So now I have my -5 dBs of compression. If this was a real track I was mastering, I would go into more detail and I would try out a lot more different settings, but I'm not. So the next thing I would like to do here is go to the makeup, and I would just boost this up until it reaches about -6 or -3 dBs, and then I will carry on with the mix from there. So this track is sitting comfortably now at -6. It is peaking up to -3 a little bit more, and that's basically that. So after this, what you could add is a limiter. So I could hop in and add something like the L3 multi-maximizer and then just push the threshold down. And then boom, bam, you have your track mixed and mastered in version number 1. So version number 1 is basically just adding you could do this with anything really, but you're basically adding a EQ, compressor, and kind of a shaper, and then maximizing it, basically adding a limiter onto it. Another thing that you could do is, if you wanted to go a different route, this is a free plugin that I recommend to a lot of people. It is called the Ferric TDS, and it is very user friendly, and it does sound pretty decent when you're using it right. So the way this works is I'm only really touching the dynamics and the saturation. So the way the dynamics works is the higher I turn this up, the more the track will compress. Saturation is the higher I turn this up, the more the track will be distorted. It's as simple as it is. You have a SC over here. Basically what this means is it's telling you if you want to put a high pass onto the compressor. So if you didn't want to compress the low end, you would just turn this up to about 3 o'clock, and then your low end wouldn't go into the compressor and you wouldn't be compressing it. Moving on to the dynamics, let's take a look at how it sounds. Cool. So once again, my compressor activation is over here. It's telling me how much the track's compressing by. Once again, you don't want really go more than 5 dBs of compression on the master chain. That's about the max I like to look at. And once you have this done, you could literally just use the trim knob and you could trim it all the way up to where you want the track to sit. And then your track's basically mastered. So let's do that. Cool. So you could do that. You could use the trim and just boost it all the way up, or you could add a limiter after this. Like you could add an L3 maximizer after this. You could essentially maximize your track again once it has been completed. I'm not going to do that right now because I've already showed you how the maximizer works. Let's hop into the method number 3, which is kind of a more tricky one. So method number 3, what I would do here is I would open up Izotope Ozone and I would add an equalizer. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go mid-side, and I'm going to go to the side section, solo it, and add a high pass and bring it up to about 250. The reason for this is because once you have signal underneath 250 Hertz, your track is at risk for phasing to happen. And what phasing is when there are two signals that are completely 180 degrees out of alignment and they start to basically cut into each other and they reduce the volume of the overall signal coming in that area. So once that's done, we go to the midsection and we can add a high pass. I'm turning it into a brick wall and I'm putting it at 35 Hertz. Reason being is because most speakers won't really recreate that sound underneath 35 Hertz, and it's going to clean up your mix a little bit more. I'm going to add in number 8, do a low pass brick wall. I'm going to add it in at 20,000 Hertz, and that's how I'm going to do it, because any speaker you'll never be able to hear above 20,000 Hertz. After that, I'm going to pop in an imager and I'm going to learn the track. So I'm going to click learn and let the track play. See what this tells me. Okay, so now that the track is learned, instantly what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the low end band. I'm going to make it mono. So basically what this does is that it adds width or it reduces width to certain sections of the track dependent on what you want. So the best thing for you to do is go into the correlation trace and you can just take a look. If the correlation trace at any point goes below a certain point, if it goes below this line over here, it means that there is phasing. So let's play the track back and see what we have to work with before we start widening the track. Instantly the track is quite mono, not a lot of stereo signal. So what we can instantly do is you can grab the band 4 and band 3 and we can start dragging it up a little bit more just to increase the width of the track. After this, I'm going to try band 2 and see what it sounds like before accepting that I like it or not. And boom bam, that's kind of how you're going to use the imager. You can basically go balls to the wall with this and make your track extremely wide. It all depends on what you want it to sound like. If you turned all of these knobs up and you played it like this, it just gets really wide. So it's all about what you want. What I would recommend doing is basically going to a certain frequency, boosting it all the way up, and then reducing it until you find a point where you want it to be. That would be the best way to look at it. After this, you could add a dynamic EQ. And the way you would use this dynamic EQ is you would go to certain frequencies that you don't like and you could compress them down. So in this track, I feel like there might be a lot of highs in the track. So I'll give it a listen. And cool, maybe for some reason I think there's way too many highs in this track and I want to bring it down. All I'm going to do is grab this, drop it down by about 1.5 dBs, right? Then I'm going to go to the threshold section and I'm going to drag this down until I find the right point of compression. So I'm looking for no more than 5 dBs of compression. So let's check it out. Cool. And you can see at the bottom here, it basically shows you that there is about 1 dB of compression running over there. So that's how you could use it. You could maybe go to the low end section, be like, cool, yeah, my low end's way too boomy. You could drop it down a little bit. You could bring it down as much as you want it to be. Then the thing I like about Ozone is that it gives you 2 types of maximizers, and I utilize both of them in my mixes. So what happens is if I'm mastering with Ozone, I'm always using the vintage limiter and the maximizer together. I'm putting the maximizer on modern, IRC4 modern, and I'm just going to drag it down until I get to the point of loudness that I'm settled with. Cool. So my track is loud. It is peaking at 0 dBs, but it could be a little bit louder. And this is where I use my vintage limiter. The reason for this is because I like the way it sounds. And every single time when I'm adding my vintage limiter, I'm always putting the ceiling at -0.3. Reason for that being is that in the analog to digital conversion, there might be some, they call it ghost frequencies, that peak up and might make your track peak louder than 0 dBs. So just to counter that, you always got to master your music to 0.3 decibels. It's not audible to any human, but it will make a difference to your track. So what we're going to do now is we're just going to drag the threshold down till it compresses the track a little bit, and then we'll take it from there. Cool, so that's how I would use the vintage limiter, and as you can see at the bottom here, the limiter was reading at -2 dBs of compression, which isn't really that much, and it's really going to help get your track to sound a lot louder. So that was 3 ways that you could master your music. Normally when I'm mastering my music, I'm hopping in and out of different things. I might use the ARTG for an EQ and a nice compression on my sound. Then I might add in the Ferric TDS to add a slight bit of compression, maybe 1 dBs of compression. Then I might add the Ozone Izotope plugin for the vintage limiter and the maximizer to maximize the music, or I might add it for the EQ, or I might add it for the dynamics. It really is dependent on what your track needs and what it should sound like. And the best way to go about mixing and mastering your music is to just practice and practice and practice and teach yourself everything that you need to learn. So what I would highly recommend is grabbing a reference track and literally just soloing the low end of the reference track and trying to make your track match theirs. And that's basically the final steps that you need to do to master your music. It is very simple, but it is also very tricky. It's just all about finding your sound.